How's it going, guys? AnxiousCynic back again, or maybe for the first time, with something new. And as you can see from the screen and from the title of this video, we are going to give Blender a spin. So first, a couple of things I want to get into before we get into this tutorial. Sorry, it's long-winded. I'll try to have something on the screen if you want to avoid the intro here, but I want to get this out of the way. So first of all, why am I doing Blender tutorials? One is I've been asked to by a number of people, and I just kind of wanted to myself. But unfortunately, I'm not the most familiar with Blender. I'm not proficient at it. I'm not very good at it. So if that's the case, why would I make a Blender tutorial? Well, my schedule with making videos and things like that has become rather strained, and I find it hard to make myself get into Blender to actually practice with it and do more things. So what I'm hoping is to try and make a somewhat comprehensive tutorial series, and we'll make an animation maybe over the course of the series, and that'll help me to dedicate myself to putting time into Blender and actually doing something with it. We'll see how it goes. If nothing else, hopefully I can do this video and help you guys get started so that you can find better resources than this one. But anyway, that's all to say. I'm gonna give it a try, so expect a bumpy ride, but hopefully there'll be something of some, substance and of some help to someone and some people. The next thing I want to say is this is not a Blender tutorial. If you're not familiar at all with Blender, then this is probably not where you want to start. There is a channel that I use to help get brushed up on Blender, which is Born CG. I'll have a link in the description of the playlist for his channel of the videos he's done to help, get the beginners getting started with Blender and everything. This is primarily going to be aimed more towards just using Blender to make Minecraft animations, what I've learned about doing that so far, and any other little tips that I've picked up along the way will be hopefully sprinkled in there as well. So if you just want to make Minecraft animations with Blender, then maybe this will be, enough of a resource for you. But in general, if you really want to kind of know how Blender works and how to interact with it more, then that series is definitely what you want to go to. So as far as Minecraft Blender animation tutorial series goes, there is one that I'm sure most of you are aware of, which is by Arbiter617 of the Black Plasma Studios fame. So if you haven't seen that already, I'm kind of surprised if you haven't, but he did a tutorial series on it, and a lot of things that he covered there I will be covering here. I did learn some things from his tutorials as well, so I will try my best to reiterate those and include those tips in this tutorial series. So finally, before we get into the meat of this, you may know that I do Mine-imator tutorials, so you may be wondering, why go to Blender? Well, Blender can produce better quality, and it gives you a whole plethora of other options when it comes to 3D animation and whatnot. You can expand on Mine-imator a bit, but if you really want to graduate into more of the big leagues, quote-unquote, then Blender is definitely the place to start. It is, after all, a free program. And, I know a lot of you guys are fans of the aforementioned Black Plasma Studios and Arbiter 617. So, a lot of you want to make animations the way that those guys do it. So I thought it would be cool to do a tutorial series on it. And that's why you would want to learn Blender a little bit, all right? Okay, so now that we've got all that over with, hopefully I said everything I needed to say. And I apologize that it took so long, but here we go. So when you start up Blender, we're gonna get into how to get Blender and stuff in a moment, but this is what you'll see. So what I want to do though, I'm just gonna click in here to get rid of that. You can start up your previous file from that screen and whatnot, but what I'm gonna do is go back to the factory settings of Blender because I already have some customizations, and I don't want to confuse you with that. So this is what Blender is gonna look like when you first get it. So let's go ahead and bring up. I have Blender installed on my Steam account, as you can see here, and I personally would recommend it because what having it through Steam does is keeps Blender up to date. So whenever they come out with a new version, Steam will automatically download that and install it, so you can constantly use the newest version of Blender without having to do it yourself. And as you can see here, if you have Steam installed, if you don't, I recommend you get it. If you don't wanna, then you can of course go to blender.org. I'll probably have this link in the description, and you can download it just like anything else, and you'll have the standalone version of Blender, but again, you'll have to keep it updated yourself. So hopefully you're aware of how to download and install programs and whatnot. If you're coming from my Mine-imator tutorials and wanting to graduate to Blender, then I'm sure you know how to do that. So moving on, let's go ahead and check what we need to do to get Blender set up to make Minecraft animations. So what I'm going to do is go to File here. You're going to go to User Preferences. And what we have is this little window here. And I'm going to go each one by one. All right, so this is the interface tab, and there's not much we're going to mess with here, I don't think. Hopefully I don't forget any of these. I made some notes, so hopefully we'll cover it all. A couple of things that I do check is zoom to mouse position. This is totally subjective. You can play with these settings and see what you want to do and how you want to use Blender. And I have rotate around selection. Again, like I said, these are just my settings, what I typically use. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. I might change them myself in the future, but this is just how I've had mine set up. All right, so we're going to go into some of these other ones. I don't believe I've changed anything in editing. Again, if you watch the Born CG tutorial series, then he explains some of this stuff. So we're just going to skip this one and move on to input. And here's one of the things, Blender is different than most other programs, whereas you have to select things with the right mouse button instead of the left mouse button. And that can be really confusing, and to me it adds an extra level of complexity to already trying to learn a complicated and daunting program. So what I've done is I generally just go ahead and change this to select with the left. And that kind of helps to get rid of some of that, dauntingness of like, how do I interact with the program and whatnot. You can try it the default way, but I'm going to have it this way. So when I say left or right click, which Blender is very specific about these things, just remember that I have changed this if you don't follow along with that. Pretty sure that's about all we're going to change. There may be some more, but for now, we're just going to go ahead and leave it at that. We're going to come back to add-ons in a moment. And when you go to themes, this is the default theme that I have here, and it's not so bad, but a lot of people like to use the Elysium one, I believe. And you can see how that changes it. It kind of gives it a nice dark, cool look or whatever. But I think for now, we're going to stick with the default theme for this series. If I change it somewhere along the way, well, it's not going to make any difference. It's just the colors. Or you can, you can check out any of these presets, or you can, of course, customize it yourself, which is a rather in-depth and tedious process, but you can. All right, so under File, the only thing we're going to really change under this, at least for me, is the Autorun Python. Sorry about clicking on that. I was just checking out what it was. The Autorun Python script. So what this is Blender uses Python scripts to execute certain tasks, like when you download an add-on and whatnot, which we'll be getting to in a moment. It uses these Python scripts. So sometimes if this isn't turned on, those scripts won't run because Blender is not told to auto-run them, and you can have problems. So I generally just turn this on and leave it on so that when you use add-ons, it'll work flawlessly, hopefully, unless there's some other problem. The only problem with this is Python scripts, apparently, from what I've heard in passing, is they can be malicious. Like if you do download a bad one, it could spell problems for you. So if you do this, make sure you know what you're downloading and that you're going to reputable sources and not just downloading Python scripts for Blender willy-nilly and stuff, okay? So that's pretty much it. We're going to change under this tab, I believe, and we're going to move on to System. All right, so now that we're under System, the only thing we're going to do under here is two things, one of which is universal. You want to untick bitmaps. I'm not sure what purpose this serves if you're doing general 3D animation, but for Minecraft animations, you need this off so that the textures will load properly. At least that's what I've come to understand. I don't know if there's any exceptions to that rule. And finally, you have the compute device option here, and it says none and CPU, and this is meaning it will use the CPU, the processor in your computer, to render the scenes. And generally, unless maybe you have a really beefy processor, this can be kind of slow and tedious, but if you have a compatible graphics card, if you're using a desktop in particular, but maybe a gaming laptop or something, you can use the OpenCL option, which is generally what I use, and my graphics card is an AMD graphics card, so it's going to say Tonga because that's the chipset or whatever, I don't recall, that card uses. So I'm going to have it on this. If you don't have that option, that's perfectly fine. Just leave it on CPU. and you'll be able to do the same thing. It's just rendering will take longer, which is unfortunately a huge problem with Blender, but we'll leave that where it is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click Save User Settings. We're going to have to do this again, but just so we don't lose anything in case Blender crashes, because it does crash sometimes, we're going to go to Add-ons. And the only thing we're going to really need here is the MCPrep add-on. So let's go ahead and go into Firefox, and we're going to go to, let's close that, MCPrep. Now, this is what's going to help make Blender a little bit more like Mine-imator. If you don't want to create everything you're using or have to append things, which we'll get into at a later time, this makes it really easy to spawn in certain things and whatnot. So you're going to go to this link, it will be in the description, and you're going to come down here to the bottom and you're going to download the zip file. Again, if you're on Mac, which I think Blender can be used on Mac, unlike Mine-imator. I don't know how all this stuff works for you guys, so hopefully you can sort that out for yourself. All I know is you're going to download this zip file, and we have a couple of things that you'll have to download as well, or at least one thing in particular, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So back in Blender, we're under the Add-ons tab, and what you're going to do is click on this button down here that says Install from File. Once you've downloaded the MCPrep add-on, of course. So once you click on that, you're going to get this screen, which is a general like file browser type screen, and we're going to navigate to where we have that zip folder saved to. You're not going to extract it or anything like that. You're just going to leave it as a zip folder, and as you can see here, it says MCPrep add-on 2.13 zip, and I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to go up here and click Install from File. So once it's done with that, you'll see that nothing happens here, and we're going to go into the search and type in MC, and over here you see the object MCPrep add-on. So I'm going to go ahead and tick that, and there you go. You have this add-on is now enabled so that we can use it. I'm pretty sure there's no settings in here that we really need to work with. Hopefully I'm correct in thinking that. And with that on, I'm going to click Save User Settings, so that way anytime we come back to Blender, we will have that good to go and not have to enable it again. Another thing, like as far as using Blender in general, when you have a lot of add-ons that actually come with it that are not turned on, so I recommend if you want to do more than just Minecraft stuff or basic Minecraft stuff, then you look into a lot of these and what they can do for you and whatnot. But as far as the setup goes, that's it. You've got your add-ons and you're good to go. And you saved the user settings, so every time you start up Blender, you should have all that stuff done, and you shouldn't have to do it again, maybe unless or until, so make notes of those settings. Anything you change in there, when Blender updates, you may lose that. Alright, so before we get started with how to set up everything else in Blender, I'm going to go ahead and go over these. This is JMC to OBJ. This is the software you're going to use that helps you to import your Minecraft worlds into Blender. So I recommend going to this link. All these links will be in the description. Downloading this by clicking on Download the latest release, and you'll have that. You may have to extract it. I'm not sure. We'll get to this in probably a later part. We're not going to go into it today, but just so you have everything set up, you can download this and have it ready. And then on the, I don't know how you pronounce this, Rymdnisse? I don't know. Anyway, Rymdnisse.net. He has this huge pack of it's like character rigs and models and all the objects in Minecraft and all that cool stuff he's already got ready and rigged up and ready for you to use. So you can go to this link, and then down here by default it's usually on internal, and we're going to be using the Cycles rendering engine, which I'll get to in a moment. It's up to you. If you want to try internal, then that's fine, but we're going to be using Cycles in this tutorial series, so if you want to use this and follow along if we use any of these things, then I recommend downloading the Cycles version. So yeah, just get this stuff downloaded and ready to go, and you should be prepared for anything that we do or encounter in this series. Okay, so a few things about the Blender interface and things that we need to do to get set up. So for one thing, by default, Blender comes with the Blender render engine selected by default, as I said. So you're going to click on that and come down here and click on Cycles Render. And when you do that, some things are going to change. It's not really going to be that noticeable right now, but there is a big difference in how Cycles and Blender Render work. And generally, Cycles is better. Cycles is the new engine. It's the future. It works better. You can do more with it. So yeah, you definitely want cycles if you want to keep up with the updated changes of Blender. That all came out very poorly, but anyway, just suffice to say, if you want to use Blender Render, which is technically I think supposed to be somewhat easier and faster than cycles, then you can. But in my opinion, like, I don't know why you would waste time learning that if it's outdated and it's kind of getting phased out. Cycles is, from my understanding, where the future of Blender is, and if you're not learning it, then you're kind of like putting yourself at a disadvantage. So you'll notice over here we have this toolbar on the left, and as you can see there, if you can see that, that's MCPrep there on the bottom. So when we enabled that add-on in our user settings, then this tab showed up. So when we click on it, then we get this little view over here with all the options that the add-on gives us. And as you can see, we have friendly mobs, hostile mobs, passive mobs, and player mobs. And what this is like rigged characters that we can actually bring in just by clicking on one and stuff like that. And then as you can see up here, we have the world exporter, one of which is JMC to OBJ, which I advise you to download. And then you have Mine-imator, which is another option. The reason I said JMC to OBJ is because in my experience, it works better and it actually interacts with the MCPrep tools. But yeah, that's what I recommend. If you want MCPrep tools and the importer of your worlds to interact, then as far as I understand, JMC is going to give you the best circumstances. But if you want to check out Mine-imator, I'm not going to provide a link to it, but you can Google it. You are free to do so and compare the two and see which one you like. But we'll be getting into that at a later time. Basically over here, if you are coming from Mine-imator, this area over here is kind of your crafting table, so to speak. This is all the stuff that allows you to like spawn in things. You can spawn in planes and cubes and spheres. If I click on this, then Blender crashes. Okay, sorry about that, but for some reason Blender wants to be wonky today, and that is unfortunately one of the downsides to Blender. Anyway, so you can do things, you can spawn in stuff, but there's usually more preferred ways of messing with things, but this is a way to do things without having to learn as much about Blender with its key bindings and shortcuts and all that kind of stuff. This, of course, can be gotten rid of. You can press the T key on your keyboard, and that basically stands, I guess, for toolbar, and it lets you bring it in and out, or you can drag it just like you saw me do earlier. And when you do drag it out, you'll get this little plus sign, and when you click on that, it brings it back out. So that's the basic interface. You can also hit the N key or use this thing over here, and this brings out your properties window, and this gives you information about the location and rotation and all sorts of other things that we won't really get into at this point in time. Again, this is kind of like general Blender stuff, so yeah, I recommend you watching this Born CG tutorial series. In any case, the N key gets rid of this and brings it back up, so I can do like that. But anyway, let's move on to actually getting Blender set up. Obviously, I need to change this stuff because it changed. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is under our render tab. This little camera is our render tab, and this is all of your render settings. If you're coming from Mine-imator, then you may recall the project tab where you change things, and you have the render settings and all the quality and all that kind of stuff. But that's basically what this is, the resolution and everything. And what I have here is the device's CPU by default, but as you may recall, I changed it to the OpenCL option in our user settings, so I need to come up here and click GPU compute, and that's going to make it use my graphics card for rendering instead of the CPU. So those are two steps you have to set up to get that going for you. By default, Blender is set up to render at 1920 by 1080, which is full HD resolution. And this percentage here means it's going to render half of that frame size. So instead of 1920 by 1080, it's going to do 50% of that. And the reason that is because you may want to set this up for the size that you'll ultimately want to render your final project at. But while you're working on it and you want to do like test renders and stuff, you may not want to render the full frame size and it takes forever. So you can bring this down. You can leave it at 50%. You can bring it down even further just so you can like render a quick test and go from there. So anyway, those are the basics, and we can get into more of this later on. But for now, we just want to set up Blender so that it's ready to go when we're ready to use it. So for this thing down here, we went to the Performance tab, and we have the Tiles option here. And for me, since I'm using a GPU, it's better for me to have this be a higher number, which is 256 by 256. And what that is the size of the tile that it renders at. It's the way that Cycles renders. We'll get into it at a later time, but just suffice to say, if you are able to do the GPU compute, then you'll want to up this. If you're using CPU, you may want to bring it down. There are some articles and stuff that people have done to talk about like the best sizes to make this. I think if you're using CPU, they recommend that you bring it down to like 16 by 16. So I recommend looking into that if you want. But for me, it's going to be not 265. It's going to be 256 by 256. The next thing we're going to do is go to the next tab over here, which is our render layers tab. Jesus Christ. And this is stuff that's not going to really come into play right away, but we're just going to go ahead and try to get it set up. And we're going to go down here to passes, as you may have seen, and I'm going to click on mist, and I'm going to click on vector. We're just going to enable both of those so they'll be white with it ticked, and you'll be good to go there. That's all you want to do with that. And finally, we're going to go over here to our world tab, and we're going to come down here to ambient occlusion. Now this is optional. I recommend you play with it and see whether or not you want ambient occlusion. Mine-imator actually has kind of a simulation of ambient occlusion, but obviously Blender has a much more robust and realistic version of it. I generally tick it. I play with it every now and then to see what I want, but generally I leave it ticked. And what I do here for the factor, I actually bring that down to about 0.35. Again, this isn't something I've experimented with a whole lot, but I found this to kind of give me the results that I want in my experimentation. So yeah, there's that. And all this stuff will be relevant more later on, particularly if you're doing other things with Blender, but it does have some effect on what we'll be doing for Minecraft animations. So I think that's pretty much it, and now that we've got those things set up, what I'm going to do is go over to File, drop that down, and I'm going to go to Save Startup File. So when I click on that, and it's going to say OK, and I'm going to click again, or you can hit the Enter key, however you want to do that. All of these changes we've made with the add-ons, we've got the MCPrep add-on enabled, we've got Cycles Render enabled, we've set up our rendering options for GPU compute if you did that, and what the size of the tiles that we're going to be rendering with, the world settings, all these things will be saved, and every time we start up Blender, that's what we will be using right off the bat, and we won't have to change all that stuff again. So again, I'm sorry that this was very wordy and lengthy and whatnot, but once you have all this stuff set up, we can kind of focus on what we want to do with Blender, all right? So those are the basics. Again, I am not the best when it comes to this stuff. I'm not fully understanding of it, if that's the right word. I think it's fried my brain at this point. In any case, I'm just trying my best, and I hope it was helpful to you guys. And yeah, so sorry to spend so much time getting all the stuff set up, but hopefully that will expedite the process in the future as we continue. So I hope that was helpful, guys. I hope you want to see this series. If you do, then feel free to let me know. Let me know if you want to see more and whatnot. Of course, like I said, I'm doing this as kind of a self-help as well as to help you guys. So if anyone is more experienced than me, I highly would highly appreciate, there we go, any tips or whatever you can offer in the comments and things like that. Other resources for learning and tutorials and whatnot. But yeah. So that's it. So thanks for joining me, guys. I hope this was helpful. As always, if you want to help me, you want to support the channel, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're watching with an ad blocker, it also helps if you turn that off when you watch my videos, but I'll leave that up to you. As far as supporting my channel directly, I also have a Patreon page, so feel free to check that out if you want to support me and help me to continue doing this stuff and afford me more time to play with Blender and become daunted and give up on it. Like I have in the past. Anyway, that's it for me, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.